The transport ship shook as it moved through space. Inside, hundreds of refugees sat in the dark cargo hold. They were tired, hungry, and afraid. Among them was a small boy named Kang Do-hyun. He was only 7 years old, but his eyes held no tears. He had already cried all his tears 3 days ago, when the pirates came to his colony world. Do-hyun remembered the fire. He remembered his mother pushing him toward the evacuation shuttle. He remembered her face disappearing in the smoke. Now he sat alone, his small hands holding his knees, watching the other refugees whisper prayers to gods who did not answer. The ship suddenly stopped shaking. Bright lights filled the cargo hold. A voice spoke in a language Do-hyun did not understand. The adults around him began to cry with relief. Someone translated, "They had been rescued by the Valarian Empire." Do-hyun did not know what the Valarian Empire was. He did not care. He only knew that he was alone in a universe that had taken everything from him. The Valarians were tall and beautiful. Their skin was pale like moonlight, and their hair was silver white like fresh snow. Their eyes were violet, deep and strange. They wore flowing robes and spoke in soft voices. To Do-hyun, they looked like the spirits from his grandmother's old stories. The refugees were moved to a large royal cruiser. They were given food, water, and clean clothes. Medical officers treated the wounded. Social workers recorded names and searched for family members. Do-hyun gave his name and watched them write it down. When they asked about his family, he simply shook his head. 3 days passed. Do-hyun kept to himself. He found a small corner near a window and spent his time watching the stars. He did not speak to anyone. The other refugee children played together, finding comfort in each other, but Do-hyun remained apart. He was building a wall around his heart, brick by brick. On the 4th day, someone came to his corner. She was small, his own age, with silver white hair tied in elaborate braids and violet eyes that sparkled with curiosity. She wore a dress that probably cost more than Do-hyun's entire home. Behind her stood 2 nervous guards who looked very unhappy about where she was going. The girl stood in front of Do-hyun and stared at him. He stared back. "You are a human," she said in broken Korean. Her accent was strange, but the words were clear. "You are a Valarian," Do-hyun replied flatly. "I am Princess Yuna of House Valaris." She said it like it was supposed to mean something. Do-hyun shrugged. "I am Kang Do-hyun of Busan." The princess frowned. She was clearly not used to people who did not react to her title. She sat down across from him without asking permission. The guards behind her looked like they might faint. "Why do you sit alone?" Yuna asked. "Because I want to." "That is a bad reason." "It is my reason." Yuna tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle she wanted to solve. Most children would have left by now, annoyed by his coldness. But Yuna was not most children. She had grown up in a palace full of adults who smiled false smiles and spoke false words. This human boy, with his honest rudeness, was the most interesting thing she had encountered in years. "I will sit with you," she announced. "I did not invite you. I do not need invitation. I am a princess." Despite himself, Do-hyun felt his lips twitch. This strange girl was annoying, but she was also funny. He turned back to the window and said nothing. But he did not tell her to leave. Yuna came back the next day, and the day after that, and every day for 3 weeks. She taught him Valarian games. Some were complicated, involving holographic pieces and rules that changed based on the position of moons. Others were simple, like the clapping games Earth children played. Do-hyun taught her Korean folk songs his grandmother had taught him. Yuna's pronunciation was terrible, but she tried so hard that Do-hyun could not help but smile. Slowly, the wall around his heart developed a crack. They talked about everything and nothing. Yuna complained about her tutors, her endless lessons, her mother, who was always busy with royal duties. Do-hyun told her about Busan, about the sea, about catching fish with his father. He even told her about the attack, though his voice grew quiet and his eyes grew distant. Yuna did not offer empty comfort. She simply moved closer and held his hand. Her small fingers were cool against his warm ones. "I am sorry," she said. "I cannot fix what happened, but I can be here." It was such a simple thing to say, but it meant more to Do-hyun than 1,000 grand speeches. On the last night before the refugees were to be transferred to their new settlement, Yuna came to his corner. With red eyes, she had been crying. "I do not want you to go," she said, her voice breaking. Do-hyun felt something twist in his chest. In 3 weeks, this strange princess had become his only friend. She had pulled him back from the edge of darkness. She had reminded him that the universe could still hold kindness. "Then I will come back," he said. The words came out before he could think about them. Yuna looked up. "You promise?" Do-hyun nodded. "When I am big and strong, I will marry you so we can always be together." He did not know why he said it. Maybe because it seemed like the biggest promise he could make. Maybe because, in his young mind, marriage meant never being separated from someone you cared about. Yuna's tears stopped. Her violet eyes went wide. For a moment, she looked at him with an expression he did not understand. It was serious. Much too serious for a 7-year-old. She reached up and removed a small crystal pendant from her neck. It glowed faintly with inner light, pulsing like a heartbeat. She pressed it into his palm. "This is a royal heirloom," she said, her voice formal and strange. "It has been in my family for 1,000 years. I give it to you as witness to your promise." Do-hyun looked at the pendant. It was beautiful, the most valuable thing he had ever held. "I will hold you to your word, Kang Do-hyun of Busan," Yuna said. She was not smiling. "When you come back, I will be waiting." They were separated the next morning. Do-hyun was loaded onto a shuttle with other orphaned children, bound for an Earth settlement program. He pressed his face against the window and watched the royal cruiser grow smaller and smaller. In his hand, he clutched the crystal pendant. It was warm against his skin, pulsing gently, almost like it was alive. He did not know that among Valarians, such an exchange was not a childish game. He did not know that the pendant was a betrothal seal, that his words had been recorded by ancient crystals, that Princess Yuna had just bound herself to him by laws older than human civilization. He only knew that he had made a promise, and Kang Do-hyun always kept his promises. 20 years changed many things. The small refugee boy from Busan was gone. In his place stood Lieutenant Commander Kang Do-hyun of the United Earth Defense Force, a man forged by war and hardened by loss. Do-hyun was 37 years old now. His face carried scars that told stories he never spoke about. His eyes, once soft with childhood innocence, had become sharp and watchful. His body was lean and strong, built for combat and survival. When he entered a room, people noticed. When he spoke, people listened. He had joined the military at 16, lying about his age to escape the foster system. The recruiters did not ask too many questions. Earth needed soldiers. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and humanity was still the new species on the block. The United Earth Defense Force had taught Do-hyun everything. How to fight, how to kill, how to survive, when everything around him was trying to make him dead. He had a talent for violence that his instructors called natural. Do-hyun did not think it was talent. He thought it was simply the result of having nothing left to lose. His unit, the 7th Void Rangers, was famous throughout the Commonwealth. They specialized in boarding actions and close-quarters combat. When a pirate vessel needed to be cleared deck by deck, when a space station had been taken by hostiles, when the mission required brutal face-to-face fighting, they called the Void Rangers. Other species found human combat methods disturbing. The Valarians fought with grace and honor. Their blade arts developed over thousands of years. The Corvani relied on overwhelming firepower and superior technology. The Metheri used chemical weapons and psychological warfare. Humans just refused to die. They would take wounds that would kill other species and keep fighting. They would hold positions long after logic said retreat was the only option. They would sacrifice themselves for their squad members without hesitation. And in close combat, where strength and speed mattered less than sheer aggression and tolerance for pain, humans were terrifying. Do-hyun had earned his reputation in a dozen battles. The siege of Corvin Station, the pirate purge of the Outer Rim, the rescue of the diplomatic convoy in the Mitheri corridor. Each mission added new scars to his body and new weight to his soul. Through it all, he wore a crystal pendant under his uniform. He never took it off. Not in the shower. Not in combat. Not in the medical bay, when doctors stitched his wounds. The pendant hung against his chest like a second heartbeat, warm and pulsing with faint light that only he could see. Sometimes, late at night, he would hold it and remember a silver-haired girl with violet eyes. He would remember her laugh, her terrible pronunciation of Korean words, the way she held his hand when he talked about his family. The memory felt like a dream from another life. He told himself the pendant was just a memento, a reminder of a time when he was young and the universe had not yet shown him its true face. He told himself the promise he made was a child's fancy, meaningless words spoken by a boy who did not understand anything. He was lying to himself, and he knew it. On a quiet evening in the military cantina, Do-hyun sat alone with a drink that burned pleasantly going down. The screen on the wall was showing Commonwealth news, the same political nonsense that played every day. He was not paying attention until a familiar face appeared. The Valarian emperor had died. The news showed images of the old monarch, then shifted to his successor. Princess Yuna would ascend to the throne. Her coronation would be held in 3 months. It would be the largest diplomatic event in a century. Do-hyun's glass stopped halfway to his lips. She had grown up. The girl he remembered was gone, replaced by a woman of breathtaking beauty. Her silver-white hair was styled in elaborate patterns. Her violet eyes carried the weight of 3 star systems. Her face was composed, regal, perfect in a way that seemed almost unreal. But Do-hyun could still see the child in her. In the slight tilt of her head, in the way her eyes held that same spark of curiosity, in the tiny smile that played at the corners of her lips when the reporter asked if she was ready for the responsibility. "Your Highness, there are rumors that several noble houses have expressed interest in marriage alliances. Can you comment on your plans for an imperial consort?" Yuna's smile did not waver. "I have been engaged since I was 7 years old. My future consort knows who he is, even if he has forgotten his promise." The reporter looked confused. The feed cut to other news. Do-hyun set his glass down slowly. His heart was beating hard, and the pendant against his chest was warm, warmer than it had been in years. Engaged since she was 7. His promise, she remembered. After 20 years, she still remembered. Lieutenant Commander Kang. Do-hyun turned. His commanding officer, Admiral Park, stood behind him with a folder in her hands. "Admiral, you've been selected for a special assignment." She dropped the folder on his table. "The Earth delegation to the Valarian coronation needs a military attaché. Someone impressive. Someone who represents what humanity has become." Do-hyun looked at the folder. Official orders, travel permits, diplomatic credentials. Everything he needed to attend the coronation of Empress Yuna. "Why me?" Admiral Park smiled. It was the smile of someone who knew more than she was saying. "You're a war hero, Do-hyun. You've fought alongside Valarians in joint operations. You speak their language fluently. And according to our intelligence, you have a personal connection to the new Empress." Do-hyun's face remained neutral, but his mind was racing. How did they know? Had the Valarians told them? Had Yuna told them? "This is not a request," Admiral Park continued. "Earth needs good relations with the Valarian Empire. You will attend the coronation. You will be charming and diplomatic, and you will not cause any incidents. Understood?" "Understood, Admiral." Park nodded and walked away. Do-hyun opened the folder and stared at the documents inside. His hands were shaking slightly. 20 years. 20 years of war and blood, and trying to forget a silver-haired princess who had shown kindness to a broken refugee boy. 20 years of telling himself that the promise meant nothing, that she had surely forgotten, that their worlds were too different. She had not forgotten. And now, whether he was ready or not, he was going back. Do-hyun touched the pendant through his uniform. The crystal pulsed warmly against his fingers, almost like a greeting. "I'm coming, Yuna," he whispered. "I hope you know what you're asking for." Wrote. He finished his drink, gathered the documents, and went to pack his bags. In 3 months, he would stand before the girl he had promised to marry. He would find out if the promise of a 7-year-old boy still held meaning. He was terrified. He could not wait. The Valarian throne world was called Aethon Prime. Do-hyun had seen many worlds in his military career, but none like this. The planet was covered in crystalline spires that reached toward the sky like frozen prayers. Gardens floated in the air, held aloft by technology so advanced it seemed like magic. The cities glowed with soft light. What he was senses, 100 laugh, beautiful, and ancient, and absolutely alien. Do-hyun felt like a barbarian walking through paradise. The Earth delegation was small but important. 3 diplomats, 2 trade representatives, a cultural advisor, and 1 military attaché who felt completely out of place. They were housed in a guest palace that was larger than most Earth government buildings. Their rooms had windows that looked out over gardens, where flowers sang in harmony. The coronation was held in the Grand Temple of Light, a structure so massive that it had its own weather system. Millions of Valarians had gathered, filling the temple and the surrounding areas. Screens broadcast the ceremony across 3 star systems. Do-hyun stood with the other delegates, dressed in a formal uniform that felt like a costume. Around him, alien dignitaries from 100 species watched as Yuna entered the temple. She was magnificent. Her gown was made of woven light, shifting colors with each step she took. Her silver hair flowed like water down her back. Her violet eyes were calm and steady, showing no fear as she walked toward a throne that had held her bloodline for 10,000 years. The ceremony was long and filled with rituals Do-hyun did not understand. Ancient words were spoken. Sacred fires were lit. The crown of the Valarian Empire, a circlet of living crystal, was placed upon her head. When it was done, when the cheers finally faded and Empress Yuna sat upon her throne, Do-hyun found himself unable to look away. She was no longer the crying girl who had given him her pendant. She was power itself, the ruler of billions, a figure so far above him that the distance seemed impossible to cross. What was he even doing here? The reception that followed the coronation was held in the Crystal Hall, a vast space filled with floating platforms and cascading waterfalls of light. Delegates from every Commonwealth species mingled and schemed. Do-hyun stayed near the walls, nursing a Valarian drink that tasted like liquid starlight. He was considering leaving when a servant approached. Lieutenant Commander Kang. The servant bowed deeply. "Her Imperial Majesty requests your presence in the private solar." Do-hyun's heart stopped. Then it started again, beating twice as fast. He followed the servant through corridors of gold and crystal. Each hallway was more beautiful than the last. Guards watched him pass, their eyes curious. A human being summoned to a private audience with the new empress. It was unprecedented. The solar was smaller than Do-hyun expected, merely the size of a large concert hall. Windows covered one entire wall, looking out over a garden bathed in eternal twilight. The room was empty, except for one person. Yuna stood by the window, her coronation gown replaced by simpler robes. She looked younger in these clothes, more like the girl he remembered. When she turned to face him, he saw something in her eyes that the public ceremonies had hidden: exhaustion, loneliness, hope. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You came," she finally said. Her voice was softer than he remembered, musical, and warm. I received orders. Orders. She almost smiled. Is that the only reason? Do-hyun reached into his collar and pulled out the crystal pendant. It glowed brightly in his hand, pulsing with light that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. I never took it off, he said. In 20 years, I never once took it off. Yuna's composure cracked. For just a moment, she was not an empress. She was just a woman who had waited a very long time. You made a promise, Kang Do-hyun of Busan. I remember. Do you remember what you promised? Do-hyun swallowed. That I would come back. That I would marry you. We were children, Yuna said slowly. But among my people, such words are not childish games. When you made that promise, when I accepted it and gave you my pendant, we entered into a binding contract. She crossed the room until she stood before him. Up close, he could see the fine lines of stress around her eyes, the weight of the crown already pressing down on her. By Valarian law, we have been engaged for 20 years. The pendant you wear is a betrothal seal. My people know of it. They have always known. It is why I have refused every marriage offer, every political alliance, every suitor who came to my door. Do-hyun felt the ground shifting under his feet. You could have told me. I did not want you to come back because of law. I wanted you to come back because you wanted to. She looked at him with those violet eyes that had haunted his dreams for 2 decades. Do you want to, Do-hyun? Or have I been waiting for nothing? She produced a document from her robes. It was written in both Valarian and Korean, official and formal. This is an annulment. If you sign it, we are strangers. The betrothal is dissolved. You can return to your life, your military, your earth. No one will think less of you. A promise made by a child is not a promise that must be kept by a man. She held the document out to him. Do-hyun looked at it. He looked at her. He thought about his life, his career, his place in the human military. He thought about the wars he had fought and the scars he had earned. He thought about the emptiness he carried, the feeling that something was missing no matter how many battles he won. He thought about a little girl who had sat beside him when he was broken and alone, who had held his hand and said, I cannot fix what happened, but I can be here. What if I don't want to sign? He asked. Yuna's eyes widened. Her breath caught. Then you would be choosing to honor your promise. You would become my consort. You would leave your world, your species, everything you know. I know. The court will not accept you easily. There will be challenges, enemies, people who believe a human is not worthy of standing beside the Empress. I know. You would be giving up everything. Do-hyun reached out and gently pushed the document away. I made a promise, he said simply. I always keep my promises. 1. Yuna stared at him. Then, slowly, the tears she had been holding back for 20 years began to fall. She did not sob. She did not wail. She simply cried, quietly, as 2 decades of waiting finally came to an end. Do-hyun did not know what to do. So he did what she had done for him long ago. He held her hand. I cannot fix what happened, he said softly. But I can be here. Yuna laughed through her tears. You remember. I remember everything. Outside the window, the eternal twilight of Aethon Prime painted the gardens in shades of purple and gold. Inside the solar, a soldier and an empress stood hand in hand, beginning a story that would change the galaxy. The promise had been kept, but the challenges were only beginning. The announcement shook the Commonwealth. Empress Yuna of the Valarian Empire, ruler of 3 star systems and leader of one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, was engaged to a human. Not a diplomat, not a scholar, not even a high-ranking officer. A scarred lieutenant commander from a species that most aliens still considered primitive newcomers. The reaction was immediate and harsh. News broadcasts across the galaxy debated the scandal. Politicians questioned the Empress's judgment. Academics wrote long papers about the cultural implications. Comedians made jokes about the short lifespan of humans and whether the Empress would need a new consort in 60 years. But nowhere was the reaction stronger than in the Valarian court itself. Lord Taejun of House Garan was furious. His family had been planning a royal marriage for 3 generations. He was handsome, powerful, and connected to every major noble house. He had been the obvious choice for imperial consort. Everyone knew it. Everyone expected it. And now, a human had taken what was rightfully his. Taejun called a gathering of the noble houses. They met in a private hall, far from the Empress's eyes, though they all knew she would learn of the meeting eventually. That was the point. They wanted her to know. "This is an insult," Taejun declared. His violet eyes burned with anger. "A human on the Valarian throne. Our ancestors would weep." The other nobles murmured agreement. Some were genuinely outraged. Others simply smelled opportunity. In chaos. "The law is clear," one elder noble said carefully. "The betrothal seal was given and accepted. By our own traditions. It is binding. Traditions can be challenged," Taejun replied. "The ancient rites allow for disputes when a betrothal is contested. I invoke my right as a suitor of worthy blood." The room went quiet. Everyone knew what he was suggesting. It was old law, rarely used in modern times. A way to challenge an unwanted betrothal through trial. Single combat. Word reached the palace before dawn. A messenger delivered the formal challenge to Do-hyun as he ate breakfast in his guest quarters. The document was written in flowing Valarian script, but the meaning was clear enough. Lord Taejun of House Garan challenges the human Kang Do-hyun to honorable combat. Victory grants right to the imperial betrothal. Defeat means death or permanent exile. Do-hyun read the document 3 times. Then he laughed. The messenger looked confused. "The challenge is no laughing matter. Human. Lord Taejun is the finest blade in the empire. He has killed 30 opponents in ritual combat. I'm sure he has." Do-hyun set down the document. "Tell Lord Taejun. I accept." The news spread like fire. The human had accepted a death match against the greatest warrior in the Valarian nobility. The court buzzed with excitement. Gambling houses set odds at 50-1 against the human. Some nobles who had secretly supported Do-hyun began distancing themselves, not wanting to be associated with a dead man. Yuna came to him that night, her face pale with worry. "You should have refused," she said. "There were other ways. Political solutions. Legal arguments. Those would take years. This takes 1 afternoon." Do-hyun checked the edge of his combat knife. A simple military blade he had carried through a dozen battles. "Besides, if I hide behind lawyers, they'll never respect me. They'll always see me as weak. And if you die?" Do-hyun looked at her. "I won't die. You cannot promise that. Watch me." The duel took place in the Crystal Arena, an ancient structure built specifically for ritual combat. The seats were filled with thousands of Valarians. Screens broadcast the fight across the empire. For the first time in centuries, a human would face a Valarian noble in formal single combat. Lord Taejun entered from the eastern gate. He was tall and elegant, dressed in ceremonial armor that had been in his family for generations. His blade was a masterpiece, forged from crystallized starlight, humming with energy. He moved like water, graceful and confident. Do-hyun entered from the western gate. He wore his standard military uniform. He carried his standard combat knife. He looked small and plain, compared to his opponent, a common soldier facing a noble warrior. The arena fell silent. The ritual master spoke the ancient words. When he finished, he raised his hand. "Begin." Taejun attacked with a technique perfected over 1,000 years. His blades sang through the air in patterns so complex, they seemed like art. Each movement flowed into the next. Beautiful and deadly. Do-hyun did not try to match him. He simply moved. What Taejun knew as art, Do-hyun knew as survival. He had fought in corridors so narrow that fancy techniques were useless. He had killed in darkness, where beauty meant nothing. His body had learned a different kind of combat, brutal and efficient, designed not to impress but to end fights quickly. Taejun thrust. Do-hyun sidestepped and slashed, opening a cut on the noble's arm. First blood. Taejun's eyes widened. He had not expected the human to be fast. He adjusted his stance and attacked again, faster this time. Do-hyun took the hit on his shoulder. The Valarian blade cut deep, but Do-hyun did not stop. He moved into Taejun's guard, too close for the long blade to be effective, and drove his elbow into the noble's face. Taejun stumbled back, blood flowing from his nose. The crowd gasped. This was not how duels were supposed to go. Where was the grace? Where was the honor? There was no grace. There was no honor. There was only a human who had learned to fight in the worst places the galaxy had to offer. The fight lasted 4 minutes. Taejun was stronger. Taejun was faster. Taejun had trained since childhood in techniques passed down through generations, but Do-hyun simply would not fall. Every wound the human took, he repaid with 2 of his own. Every elegant attack, he answered with brutal practicality. When Taejun tried to create distance, Do-hyun closed it. When Taejun tried to use his superior reach, Do-hyun got inside his guard. Finally, Taejun found himself on his back, Do-hyun's knee on his chest, the simple combat knife pressed against his throat. "Yield," Do-hyun said. His voice was calm, despite the blood running from a dozen wounds. Taejun stared up at the human. This primitive creature, this inferior species, this man who had just defeated the greatest blade in the Empire. "I yield," he whispered. The arena exploded. Some cheered, some booed. Most simply stared in shock. Do-hyun stood and offered his hand to the fallen noble. Taejun looked at the hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he took it and allowed Do-hyun to pull him to his feet. "You fight like a savage," Taejun said. "I fight to win." Do-hyun released his hand. "No hard feelings?" Taejun studied the human. The blood, the scars, the complete absence of arrogance, despite his victory. "You are not what I expected, human." "I get that a lot." In the royal box, Empress Yuna sat frozen. She had watched the man she loved nearly die a dozen times in 4 minutes. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was still racing. But beneath the fear, she felt something else. Pride. Her human had kept his promise again. 6 months had passed since the duel. Do-hyun was still alive, still in the palace, and still completely out of place. The court did not know what to make of him. He did not play their political games. He did not scheme or plot or form secret alliances. He spent his mornings training with the palace guard, teaching them human combat techniques. He spent his afternoons studying Valarian history and law. He spent his evenings with Yuna, simply talking, simply being together. Some nobles found this behavior refreshing. Others found it suspicious. A man without ambition in a court full of ambitious people was either a fool or playing a deeper game. Do-hyun was neither. He was just a soldier, trying to learn how to be something more. Then the Scourge fleet arrived. The Nakari were a species that existed only to consume. They moved through the galaxy like locusts, stripping worlds of resources and leaving dead husks behind. For centuries, they had stayed in the outer reaches, too far away to be a real threat. Now, they had come to Valarian space. 3 outer colonies fell in the first week. The images that came back were horrifying. Cities reduced to rubble. Populations vanished, presumably taken for food. The Nakari did not negotiate. They did not conquer. They simply fed. The Imperial fleet mobilized, but the numbers were bad. The Nakari had brought more ships than anyone expected. The Valarians were outnumbered 3-1. The Commonwealth promised reinforcements, but logistics meant help was weeks away. The Empire was facing the greatest threat in its history, and it was facing it alone. Do-hyun went to Yuna with a request. "Let me fight." Yuna's face went pale. "No, I'm a soldier. This is what I do. 1. You're my consort. Your death would be a political disaster. It would show weakness. It would encourage our enemies." Do-hyun stepped closer. "And if I sit here safe while others die? What kind of consort is that? What kind of man?" "A living one." The words echoed in the chamber. Yuna was breathing hard, her composure cracked. "I lost you once," she said, her voice breaking. "I waited 20 years. I cannot lose you again." Do-hyun took her hands in his. "You won't. I promise." "You cannot promise that. You are not immortal." "No." He smiled slightly. "But I'm very hard to kill. Ask Lord Taejun." Yuna stared at him. This stubborn, impossible human who had crashed back into her life and refused to behave sensibly. "If you die," she said slowly, "I will never forgive you. Then I won't die." Permission was granted. Lieutenant Commander Kang Do-hyun took command of a new unit, something that had never existed before. A mixed force of human Marines and Valarian soldiers. The first integrated combat unit in Commonwealth history. They called themselves the Iron Bridge. Humans and Valarians training together, fighting together, bleeding together. It was chaotic and messy, and sometimes the cultural differences nearly tore them apart. But slowly, something new began to form. The humans taught the Valarians how to fight dirty, how to use terrain, how to turn a losing battle into a stalemate into a grinding war of attrition. The Valarians taught the humans patience, discipline, how to use technology that humans barely understood, how to think in terms of centuries rather than years. Together, they became something neither species could be alone. The Battle of Kasara Station would become legend. Kasara was a mining station in the path of the Nakari advance. It was strategically vital because it controlled the hyperspace lanes to the inner colonies. If Kasara fell, the road to Aethon Prime would be open. The Valarian fleet was still 3 days away when the Nakari arrived. The station had only a small garrison. They were expected to evacuate. The Iron Bridge was on that station. Do-hyun looked at the evacuation order. He looked at his soldiers, human and Valarian alike. He looked at the tactical display, showing the incoming Nakari swarm. "We're not leaving," he said. His Valarian, second in command, a young officer named Ji-won, who had originally opposed having humans in her unit, stepped forward. "Commander, the order is clear. We are to withdraw. If we withdraw, the Nakari take this station in hours. By the time the fleet arrives, they'll be fortified and resupplied. The inner colonies will be next, but we cannot win. The numbers are impossible." Do-hyun smiled. It was not a happy smile. "We don't have to win. We just have to not lose until help arrives." The Iron Bridge stayed. What followed was 19 hours of the worst fighting Do-hyun had ever experienced. The Nakari came in waves, endless swarms of insectoid warriors that felt no fear and knew no retreat. They flooded through corridors and airlocks. They climbed through ventilation shafts. They died by the hundreds and kept coming. The Iron Bridge held. They held the main choke point where 3 corridors met. They built barricades from debris and fallen enemies. They rotated soldiers in and out, keeping fresh fighters at the front while the wounded rested. They shared ammunition and food and water. They covered each other's backs. Humans stood shoulder to shoulder with Valarians. When a human fell, Valarians carried him to safety. When a Valarian's energy weapon ran dry, a human gave her a kinetic rifle. When the Nakari broke through in one sector, both species counterattacked together. At hour 15, they ran out of ammunition for the heavy weapons. They fought with sidearms. At hour 17, they ran out of sidearms. They fought with blades and improvised clubs. At hour 19, when the Valarian fleet finally arrived and broke the Nakari assault, the Iron Bridge was still holding the choke point. 300 soldiers had held against thousands. 57 of them were still alive. The rescue teams found them surrounded by walls of Nakari dead. Humans and Valarians were slumped together, too exhausted to move, too stubborn to fall. Do-hyun was at the front, a broken blade in each hand, covered in so much blood that his original uniform color was impossible to determine. "Commander," the rescue leader said, shocked. "You're wounded." Do-hyun looked down at himself. He had taken so many cuts and bites that he had stopped counting hours ago. "I promised someone I wouldn't die," he said simply. Then he collapsed. He woke up 3 days later in a medical bay on Aethon Prime. Yuna was sitting beside his bed, holding his hand. She had not left since he arrived. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "Always." The war turned after Kisara. The Nakari had never faced anything like the Iron Bridge. Their assumption that they would sweep through Valarian space was shattered. Other integrated units formed. Other choke points held. When the Commonwealth reinforcements finally arrived, they found not a defeated empire, but a bloodied one that had refused to break. And everywhere, the story spread. Of humans who would not retreat. Of Valarians who learned to fight beside them. Of a simple soldier who held the line because he had made a promise to an empress. Humanity was no longer the newcomer species to be pitied or ignored. Humanity had proven its worth. The war ended on a spring morning. Valarian time. The last Nakari fleet was destroyed in a combined operation. Commonwealth ships from a dozen species worked together, led by the tactics that the Iron Bridge had pioneered. When the final enemy vessel broke apart in the darkness of space, cheers erupted across 3 star systems. The Scourge was defeated. The Empire was saved. And now, at last, there was time for other things. The wedding of Empress Yuna and Kang Do-hyun was announced for the following month. It would be the largest celebration in Valarian history. Every noble house was invited. Every Commonwealth species would send representatives. The entire galaxy would be watching. Do-hyun found the preparations overwhelming. He had survived 20 years of combat. He had faced pirates, aliens, and a swarm of Nakari. None of it had prepared him for wedding planners. There were fittings for clothes he could not pronounce. There were ceremonies he had to memorize. There were guest lists to approve, menus to select, and an endless stream of advisors explaining the political implications of every tiny decision. "If we seat House Garen too far from the main table, they will consider it an insult," one advisor explained. "But if we seat them too close, House Velrus will feel overlooked," another added. Do-hyun stared at the seating chart like it was a battlefield map. In some ways, it was. "Put Taejun next to me," he said finally. The advisors exchanged shocked looks. "Lord Taejun? The man who tried to kill you? He didn't try to kill me. He challenged me to honorable combat. There's a difference." Do-hyun pointed at the chart. "He fought beside us, at Kisara. His soldiers were part of the relief force. Whatever happened before, he earned his place." Word of the decision spread quickly. Lord Taejun, when he heard, spent a long moment in silence. Then he laughed. A genuine laugh that surprised everyone who heard it. "The human continues to be unexpected," he said. "Perhaps that is why she chose him." The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, because Valarian technology could control such things. The sky above Aethon Prime was a gentle purple, dotted with floating gardens that had been specially grown for the occasion. Flowers from 100 worlds bloomed along every street. The ceremony combined traditions from both cultures. Valarian light binding, where the couple's souls were symbolically joined through crystalline energy. Korean wedding bows, where Do-hyun and Yuna honored each other's families and ancestors. Vows spoken in both languages. Simple words that carried 20 years of waiting. The Grand Temple of Light was filled beyond capacity. Screens broadcast the ceremony to billions across the Commonwealth. For one day, the galaxy stopped arguing and fighting and scheming. and simply watched two people who loved each other get married. Do-hyun stood at the altar in robes that had taken 12 tailors a week to create. He felt ridiculous and magnificent at the same time. His hands were steady because he had trained them to be steady in combat, but inside, his heart was racing. Then Yuna appeared. She walked down the aisle in a gown made of pure light, shifting through every color of the rainbow with each step. Her silver hair was woven with flowers from Earth and Valarian alike. Her violet eyes were fixed on him, only him, as if the thousands of guests did not exist. She was the most beautiful thing Do-hyun had ever seen. The ceremony seemed to last forever and no time at all. Words were spoken. Lights were bound. Bows were exchanged. And finally, the ritual master spoke the words that made it official. By the light of ancient stars and the witness of all present, I declare Empress Yuna Valaris and Kang Do-hyun bound in eternal marriage. What the universe has joined, let no force divide. Do-hyun looked at his wife. His wife. The word felt strange and wonderful in his mind. I told you I'd marry you, he said softly. Yuna laughed through tears of joy. You made me wait 20 years. I wanted to make sure I was worth it. You always were, you foolish human. They kissed. The temple erupted in cheers. The reception that followed was the largest party the galaxy had ever seen. Music played. Food flowed. Species that had never spoken before found themselves dancing together. Lord Taijun gave a toast that shocked everyone. I challenged this human because I thought him unworthy, he said, standing tall before the assembled guests. I believed that a human, with their short lives and simple ways, could never deserve our empress. I was wrong. He turned to look at Do-hyun directly. Humanity's worth is not measured in their lifespan or their technology. It is measured in their hearts, in their ability to love fiercely and fight endlessly, in their strange, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. He raised his glass. To the Emperor Consort. May he continue to prove us all wrong. The cheers that followed were thunderous. As Do-hyun and Yuna opened the first dance, a messenger arrived with news from the Commonwealth Council. In recognition of human valor during the Nakari War, and in honor of the unity that this marriage represented, Earth was being elevated from junior member to full Commonwealth status. It was unprecedented. A species promoted after only 50 years. But humanity had earned it in blood and sacrifice and stubborn determination. Do-hyun heard the news while holding his wife in his arms, swaying to music that blended Valarian melodies with Korean instruments. Earth is a full member now, he said quietly. Because of the war, because of us. Yuna smiled. Humanity was always destined for greatness. You just needed someone to give you a chance. And you gave me that chance. 20 years ago, on a refugee ship. I saw something in you. Even then. A fire that refused to go out. Do-hyun pulled her closer. I see it in you too. Always have. They danced until the stars wheeled overhead, until the guests began to drift away, until they were almost alone in the vast hall. A refugee boy and a princess. A soldier and an empress. A human and a Valarian. Two people who had found each other across impossible distances and refused to let go. The promise was kept. The wedding was complete. And their story was only beginning. 10 years passed like water through fingers. The palace gardens of Aethon Prime were quiet in the afternoon light. Purple and gold painted the sky. The eternal twilight that made this world so beautiful. Flowers sang softly in the breeze, their melodies mixing with the sound of children's laughter. Emperor Consort Kang Do-hyun sat on a stone bench, watching his children play. There were two of them. Twins, born 7 years ago, in a birth that had united two species in celebration. The first hybrid children in Commonwealth history, proof that humanity and Valarian could create something new together. Prince Hyun had his father's dark eyes and his mother's silver hair. He was serious and thoughtful, already showing signs of the strategic mind that had made Do-hyun famous. He was currently trying to convince a palace guard to join their game, using logic and earnest pleading in equal measure. Princess Sora looked entirely Valarian, with violet eyes and pale skin and silver hair that floated like clouds around her face. But her personality was pure human. She was climbing a tree she had been told not to climb, laughing at the worried guards below, utterly fearless in a way that terrified her parents daily. "Sora," Do-hyun called. "Come down from there." "But, Father, I can see the whole city from up here." "You can see the whole city from any window in the palace. Come down before you fall." "I won't fall. I'm very good at climbing." Do-hyun sighed. He had faced Nakari swarms with less worry than he faced his daughter's adventures. Footsteps approached. Yuna appeared beside him, her crown set aside for the afternoon. She was not the empress right now. She was just a mother, watching her children with a smile that softened all her royal features. "She gets that from you," Yuna said, settling onto the bench beside him. "The climbing? The refusal to listen to sensible advice." Do-hyun laughed. "I seem to remember you being quite stubborn yourself. A little princess who kept visiting a refugee boy even when your guards disapproved." Yuna leaned against his shoulder. "That was different." "How?" "I was right." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Hyun finally convince the guard to play and Sora slowly make her way down from the tree. The garden was peaceful, a small bubble of calm in a universe that never stopped moving. "Do you ever regret it?" Yuna asked softly. "Leaving your world? Your military? Your species?" Do-hyun considered the question seriously. He thought about Earth, so far away now. He thought about the Void Rangers, his old unit, still fighting somewhere in the galaxy. He thought about the life he might have lived if he had signed that annulment 10 years ago. "I didn't leave anything," he said finally. Yuna looked at him curiously. "Earth is still my home," Do-hyun explained. "Humanity is still my species. I'm just more now. I'm Valarian too. My children are both." He gestured at the galaxy above them, visible even through the twilight sky. "Besides, humanity is everywhere now. We're not going anywhere." It was true. In the decade since his wedding, humans had spread throughout the Commonwealth. Human soldiers served in every fleet, bringing their stubborn resilience to battles across the galaxy. Human engineers worked on problems that other species had abandoned, refusing to accept that some things were impossible. Human artists brought new perspectives to ancient forms, creating beauty that neither species could make alone. The Iron Bridge had become a model for integrated units across the Commonwealth. Humans and Valarians, humans and Corvani, humans and species that had never worked together before. The walls between civilizations were crumbling, one friendship at a time, and everywhere. The story was told. Of a refugee boy who promised to marry a princess. Of a soldier who crossed the galaxy to keep his word. Of a love that bridged two species and helped change the universe. "Mother! Father!" Hyun ran over, his face flushed with excitement. "Guard Captain Jiwon says she'll tell us stories about the Nakari War if we finish our lessons early tomorrow. Will you ask our tutors to let us go?" Do-hyun smiled. Jiwon, his old second-in-command, was now head of palace security. She had a talent for making history sound exciting, probably because she had lived so much of it. "If you finish your lessons properly, not just quickly, I'll talk to your tutors." "Thank you, Father." Hyun ran off to tell his sister the good news. Yuna watched him go. "He's so much like you. Always planning. Always thinking ahead. And Sora is like you, stubborn beyond reason. I prefer the term determined." They laughed together, old jokes that still felt fresh after years of marriage. A messenger approached with a datapad. Yuna accepted it, read the contents, and her expression shifted from mother to empress in an instant. "The Commonwealth Council is proposing a new joint academy. Human, Valarian, and Corvani cadets, training together from the start of their careers." She looked at Do-hyun. "They want you to lead the opening ceremony." "Me? You're the symbol, husband. The proof that species can work together." She smiled slightly. "Also, You're much better at speeches than I am. That's not true. It is absolutely true. I inspire fear and respect. You inspire loyalty and hope. Different skills. Do-hyun took the datapad and read through the proposal. A joint academy. Young people from different species. Learning together. Fighting together. Growing together. The next generation of the Iron Bridge. Built from the ground up. I'll do it, he said. I knew you would. Sora came running over, her adventures in tree climbing apparently complete. She threw herself into her father's lap with the complete confidence of a child who had never doubted she would be caught. Father, tell us a story. What kind of story? The one about how you met Mother. The one with the pirates and the pendant. Do-hyun looked at Yuna. She smiled and nodded. All right, he said, settling Sora more comfortably, while Hyun sat at his feet. It started on a refugee ship. 27 years ago. I was 7 years old, and I had just lost everything. He told the story as the twilight deepened and the stars emerged. The children listened with wide eyes, even though they had heard it many times before. It never got old. This tale of their parents. When he reached the part about the pendant, Do-hyun touched the crystal that still hung around his neck. It was paired now with a matching stone that Yuna wore. Their children each had a smaller fragment. Heirlooms for a new generation. And that, he finished, is how a refugee boy and a princess made a promise that changed the galaxy. But the story's not over, is it? Hyun asked. Do-hyun looked at his son, then at his daughter, then at his wife. He looked at the palace around them, and the stars above them, and the future stretching out ahead. No, he said softly. The best stories never really end. They just become part of bigger stories. Yuna took his hand. The pendant pulsed warmly against his chest, just as it had for 27 years. The promise had been kept, and the story would continue, through their children and their children's children, until the last star faded from the sky. But that was far, far in the future. For now, in the gardens of Aethon Prime, a family sat together in the twilight, telling old stories and making new memories. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.